Have you ever been sitting at your desk when suddenly you see something in the corner of your eye, and as you turn to look at it, it's gone? Is this just a trick of the eye? Or could it be something more? We live in the sunlit world of what we believe to be reality. But in the corner of your eye, there lies a darkness that's always there, and it lies between the pit of man's fears. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, a world that is just as real, but not as brightly lit. A dark world.
I've heard about the shadow people in various online legends, as well as stories passed down through my family.
So I probably first heard about the shadow people on the TV. I was maybe 15 or 16 at the time, and I remember watching a video on ghosts, basically. It was all to do with paranormal activity, and it was a show where they kind of went ghost hunting, that sort of thing. And I was introduced to shadow people through that show.
I didn't know the term shadow person until a few years ago when I decided to look it up, because I was talking to some friends about this creepy experience that I had pretty frequently as a kid, and they shared that experience. So I started looking up terms relating to what I saw and felt, and eventually stumbled upon shadow people.
I did have a horrifying experience with one. It was one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen or felt. And it's hard to talk about sometimes.
I had an experience a couple of years ago at a place I used to live at with some friends, and to cut a long story short, one of my friends was going through a peculiar time in his life, and he was absolutely adamant that his grandfather, or at least the spirit of his grandfather, was in our house. Now, whether you believe in all that kind of stuff, I don't know. I would imagine watching this video that you probably do. But for me personally, I felt the presence of someone or something else in that house with me this one afternoon. So it was a dark and cold winter afternoon, probably 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and everybody was out the house. I was in the house on my own, and my dog was in with me. Out of nowhere, the dog started growling, staring into this space, and I didn't see or feel anything, I suppose, at the time, but I left it for a couple of minutes and eventually started to kind of feel like this is odd. And I wouldn't say I felt uneasy or nervous or anything like that, but it felt strange. It felt like something was there with me. And then at the corner of my eye, I'm talking a split second, I'm absolutely adamant that I saw movement of all I could say, it was like a silhouette, I suppose. Something right in his doorway, shift from one end of the corridor, the landing, to the other. And the next thing, the dog watches something about 6 foot tall, like, come into my bedroom. I physically was not able to see a thing. I couldn't physically see what he was looking at. But the feeling, the energy in that room dropped. It went so cold. And I truly believe there was something in there with me. Whether there was or not, I don't know, but it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up for sure.
When I was young, in my bedroom, my bed was positioned diagonally in the corner of the room from my door frame, and I was able to see under the door, when there was light cracking through, these shadows that would sort of go back and forth just in that little sliver of light, and it freaked me out a lot. And every once in a while I would go to bed and leave the door open just to see if there was actually something there. And sure enough, every night I would see these shadowy figures just passing back and forth for hours and hours.
My girlfriend, who used to go to her grandmother's house out in the middle of nowhere in the country, and she would say that she would wake up in the middle of the night and look outside the windows to see shadows dancing in the fields, which sounds like a creepypasta, but when she talks about it, I can see it in her eyes that it's not a lie. It's something that still affects her very deeply.
The shadow people phenomenon has been occurring for centuries. These shadowy figures often appear at the edge of your vision and disappear if you attempt to look at them directly. Many people all over the world have reported seeing these creatures. They have appeared in many forms, from religion and mythos to pop culture and urban legend. In 1985, The Twilight Zone aired an episode titled The Shadow Man. This episode starts with 13-year-old Danny being bullied by kids at school. Later that night, a shadow man appears in Danny's room and says,
I am the Shadow Man, and I will never harm the person under whose bed I live.
Danny uses the fact that the shadow man won't hurt him to his advantage by going out at night and impressing everyone by how brave he is. He confronts the bully and tells him to fight where the shadow man is seen the most. When he shows up, the shadow man appears from the darkness, causing him to run off. To Danny's surprise, the shadow man approaches him and grabs him by the throat and claims that he is the shadow man from under someone else's bed. Art Bell helped popularize the term shadow people on Coast to Coast AM back in 2001. Art interviewed Native American Twisted Hair's elder Thunderstrikes. He described the shadow people as tall, dark, shadowy figures with arms and legs longer than a normal human. They appear two-dimensional and are blacker than black. They appear because they feed off our emotional energy.
A lot of the negative energy we put out into the world comes back in the form of these beings. I believe that demons are a creation of who we are as a human race. And I think that's where these shadow people actually come from.
Yeah, I would definitely say that shadow people feed off negative energy.
After Thunder explained his belief on shadow people, Art encouraged his listeners to submit drawings of the creatures they've seen. All of them depicted a similar tall, dark, shadowy figure. The most common explanation for the origin of shadow people revolves around negativity.
I would honestly go as far as to say that they are negative individuals that were unhappy in their own day-to-day lives.
I think the shadow people are here simply to survive. They're much like us. We make them with our negative energy, and they don't want to go. They don't want to pass away, just like we don't want to die. And I feel like using us in our energy to just stay here in this realm is their main goal. I don't think it's any sort of intelligence. I think it's very primal. It's just, I need to do what I need to do to stay alive.
You know, hypothetically, if they are genuine, they don't seem like ghosts to me. There's something about them. They almost seem to operate on their own, like they're not trying to interact with our world per se. It's just that we encounter them sometimes.
Shadow people are also often connected to sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis occurs when you become awake while the rest of your body is still paralyzed to prevent you from moving around while dreaming. In this state, it is possible to experience hallucinations.
I would only consider them to be almost malicious, because you hear so many horror stories, you read so many horror stories about how when people were, I don't know, paralyzed in their sleep or something along those lines, it's always to do with shadow people. And I found that terrifying, to be totally honest.
This myth has been around for decades. And whether these entities are inorganic beings or just a hallucination, the phenomenon will never end. So the next time you see something out of the corner of your eye, keep your mind open. Anything is possible in this dark world.